Check.
May.
You're off tonight.
Call this meeting of the school committee for the city of Lewiston, Maine to order for Monday, August 29th, 2022. You should join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. This meeting of the school committee for the city of Lewiston, Maine to order Monday, August 29th. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We are having a slight feedback problem, folks. Give us a second. Okay. We'll continue. We'll start with school committee member introductions, starting with Ms. Parks.
Megan Parks at large.
Karen Paquette, Assistant Superintendent.
Jake Langley, Superintendent.
Bruce Damon, Ward 1.
Janet Bowden, Ward 2.
Elizabeth Eames, Ward 3.
Tanya Whitlow, Ward 4. Ashley Medina, Ward 5.
Megan Hurd, Ward 6.
Paul Beauplan, Ward 7.
Linda Scott, City Council Representative.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is consent agenda. Are there any items that members would like to remove from the consent agenda?
No.
Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. Item number 4 is public input. Members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on non-agenda items now and on agenda items later as they come up in the meeting. Comments that pertain to staff, personal matters, or student issue should be directed to the superintendent or the appropriate staff member of Lewiston Public Schools. Public comments shall be directed to the school committee, be brief, not repetitive, and related to the matter at hand. Please start by stating your name, address, and or affiliation with Lewiston Public Schools. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to speak to the committee at this time on a non-agenda item? Seeing none, I'll close that section. Item number 5, to receive and potentially vote on the nomination for the assistant principal at Montello. Mr. Superintendent.
I'd like to ask interim principal Tiffany Sachs to come up to the podium to do a little introduction and share not just this member, but also the next agenda item as another member of potentially the leadership team at Montello.
Thank you. So first, I'd like to introduce Christina Levine. She comes from Brunswick Junior High. She has almost 20 years of experience working with grades 5 through 8. And she is really set to be really successful in supporting our upper grade students at Montello. Not only does she have teaching experience in lots of different content areas, so she'll be a great instructional leader. She also brings a wealth of knowledge about RTI and different systems of support. So she's supported students academically who need a little extra. She's been responsible more recently for supporting in an RTI behavior program, which I believe she helped implement and design herself with a team of people. And so she really is bringing a lot of experiences. She's familiar with restorative practices, which you know is important to us at Montello. And she's ready to hit the ground running. So we're excited that she's bringing such instructional leadership and behavior understandings and supporting our students to really keep a safe school at Montello. So we're excited to have her.
Oh, thank you. That's all. Thank you. I'm excited to be with Lewiston, especially at Montello.
I would need a motion from someone. Mr. Beaupelon,
Make a motion to approve the nomination.
is there a second? Second by Ms. Bowden. Any discussion? All in favor? So moved. Welcome.
So the next candidate we have is Christopher Hoskins, and he comes with a wealth of experience in MTSS. For those of you who don't know that term, it's really multi-tiered system of support. So the role of this position is really to support students at different levels and really layer in whatever supports they need. So this position really requires coordination around academic supports, behavior supports, working with our social emotional learning team. So it's a lot of coordinating, a lot of making sure students have what they need at Montello. And it's also a position that runs our after school and summer programming. Those are supports that we offer for kids that are really powerful. And this person is really responsible for organizing that and running those two programs. So it is a large job that's a part of our administrative team. Chris is coming with at least 7 years of doing this work at Maine Virtual Academy. He also has a lot of instructional leadership capacity. He's worked in the middle school setting for quite some time. And that's really an area of need for us. I think now we have a team that really represents all grade levels as far as instructional leadership. And, you know, he's really going to add a wealth of knowledge from him doing this role and giving a new lens to the work. So we are excited to have him on board as well.
Thank you. I need a motion. Ms. Whitlow,
I motion to approve the nomination.
Ms. Bowden,
Yes, I'll second.
any questions? All in favor? So moved. Would you like to say something, Mr. Hopkins?
I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm a resident of Lewiston. I bring a lot of experience and passion for what I do, and I look forward to supporting the students at Montello.
Thank you. Agenda item number 7 is to receive and potentially vote on the nomination for an interim ELL director position. Mr. Langless.
Yeah, it's with great pleasure that I nominate Liza McLemore as the interim director of ELL. As you know, Director Barber, who we worked very closely with and are very fond of for many years, is in transition. And so we thank her for her many years of dedication to our community, and we may someday work with her again. But we'd like to introduce and move forward the nomination for interim ELL director of Liza McLemore.
Is there a motion? Ms. Scott, is
I will make the motion.
there a second?
I'll second that.
Ms. Parks?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no problem. Any discussion or any questions? Liza, you want to say something?
Sure. I just want to thank you all for the opportunity, and our team is really excited about continuing the work that we've started and making it a great place to work and go to school. So thank you for that.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Next item on the agenda is to recognize Lewiston Public Staff. Mr. Langless.
We have two tonight that we would like to recognize. And I want to go back a little bit in time to when I first walked into this role, and Karen at the district leadership level prior to. We had started getting these things called CRF or ARP or ESERF. There's all kinds of acronyms out there. But supports for the pandemic and facilities to the tunes of millions and millions of dollars. And with that comes the ball and chain of documenting, invoicing, reporting, submitting for reimbursement. And it's not just a full-time job. Back when I first started, I remember folks in our business office and in leadership saying essentially, I don't know who's going to do this. And so we needed help. And lo and behold, in that first, I don't know how long, Karen and many of her staff were just taking it on because someone had to do it to spend the money to get the money back. And certainly in the pandemic, we needed to spend the funds to support the effort, buying masks, buying sanitizer, training people. It was all things that very much need to happen to continue with education. And we quickly realized that that was not sustainable. And Jenny Darrigan, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the podium. Jenny Darrigan is, she does most of her work in our title and grant funding already. And she's now become essentially a master accountant for all things grant related. And I asked Jenny to come up first because it's kind of like this succession of support. And Karen picked up the ball and ran with it because that's what we needed to do for our kids. And then Jenny was there helping her as well as Sue and others. But Jenny really took it on because you had to submit these for approval. And Jenny's familiarity around the CNAs, the big plans we do for title funds allowed us to tap her expertise. She was working incredibly long days, trying to figure out things with the business office, coding, all of that stuff. So I don't want to bore you with too much lingo, but none of this happens without Jenny Darrigan leading that effort to coordinate tens of millions, upwards of $50 million in funding, in addition to her already full-time job, managing a full-time job of title and federal dollars and other grants. So we'd like to recognize Jenny, but we also, at the same time, want to recognize Peg Piscini, who, when Jenny said, "Oh dear God, I'm drowning," and somehow we got all these things approved and we're moving. Now we're at a place of invoicing. And I don't know if I'm oversharing here, but Sue knows some people at the state from her prior work, and she was like, "I know this lady, she might help," and she's pretty good. And so she made a phone call, and Peg was graciously willing to help in a capacity that I'll be honest, she really doesn't have to. And I'll also be honest to say that Jenny could have said, "I have enough on my plate. I'll do what I can, but I don't have to do all of this." But the two people you have before you right now are people that say, "How can I help?" Even when they're swamped, they get it done. awesome people. So thank you so much. Karen, do you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just add
Oh,
that,
yeah.
so Peg was supposed to join us for like, what? 2 months? And that was a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. So she's still here and, it's quite incredible.
No, no.
That's all I have for tonight, Mr. Chair, but we do have a list that's building. So now that we're back in school session and back in our regular programming, we will have more recognitions.
Great. Thank you, Jake. Agenda item number 9 is start of the year update. And I guess we're just about there.
I just want to hit highlight some things we've talked about earlier this summer, but for those who may not have been tuning in because it was summer, we started the summer thinking we were going to be about 19 drivers short. That has now shrunk to, I think we got it. And so we're very excited about transportation. Will we have some disruptions this year? Doc's appointments, people get sick, people need time off. I think so. And I'm just going to be real with people about that, but we'll continue to message and communicate like we have in the past, which seemed to get the word out. We've also shared out a letter informing people of just some different things that are on our radar, including transportation. Our school staff levels, we could always use more, but I think all schools are saying that right now. Custodian facilities wise, we've gotten some really good hires in, and that's been productive. We still have some gaps, but I can't thank our folks enough. They're filling them right now with a bit of overtime and some extra days. But they're working very hard to make sure schools are ready to be open. Ed techs is still a shortfall. We're kind of a victim of our own success there a bit. A lot of our ed techs who were really fantastic with our kids in the classroom are now meeting state criteria to be certified. And so those efforts of their continuous learning, and we'll continue to support them, have led them to take on other education roles within the district, but it leaves those positions they're leaving empty. And so we're still looking for ed techs. We do have enough to go right now, but I'd like to get closer and closer to being filled. Teacher wise, we still have some openings, especially in the special education and ELL area. We've had to make some moves just to share publicly and also with the committee that we have reached out to some teachers to say, hey, look, we need you to do a different grade or in a different school. And people have been willing to do that. They've said, if that's what the kids need, that's where I'll be. So we have some things covered. We have some things that were a little creative, but when students show up Wednesday, we're going to be ready to go. So we're excited about where we're at. It's a different stressor than last year. We're not talking about masks and vaccines per se, although we'll keep a pulse on that. But staffing and the labor shortage, which is hitting every major area, is absolutely hitting education. We're working with the state and the community college and other resources to support those who want to continue to work towards a certification and get into the field. I keep selling the perks of, the time you do get off and the ability to impact kids in a positive way and have that as your legacy. It's something that you can't get with more compensation, although this committee has worked hard to increase compensation. So I think we're in a good place and we'll continue to work at it. So I just want to give you an update on that. We're ready. We're excited. Tomorrow morning, we have our whole staff coming together at the high school for a little morning program, and we're going to kick off the year. Wednesday, students will start rolling in. There's open houses tonight and throughout the week. I just get so excited this time of year. Just when the kids start coming back, the energy it's just undeniable. So that's my quick update. I'll take any questions you may have.
Mr. Beaupont.
Thank you. I just want to go on record as totally supporting accession of ed techs to the teaching position, giving them conditional certificates, mentoring them along the way. The number of potentially wonderful teachers that have been handicapped by not having that piece of paper is tragic. Anyone can learn content, as I've said before, but to impact kids, to love kids is a big thing. And I certainly trust our administration that they would not be getting these positions unless the potential was huge. So thank you.
Taking advantage of the media we have here this evening, let's send a reminder out to all the parents and just all the people in general that we are going to have students on the streets again, walking to school, buses letting off, buses stopping to let students off. And then, of course, there's the parent pickup at the school. So please, everybody, just be patient and let's enjoy the start of the year.
Thank you, Linda.
And just to piggyback on that, we have, to maintain our bus routes, we've gone to more and more what we call pooled bus stops. So students are going to have to walk a little bit to get to some of these stops so that we can get everyone to and from school in a more efficient way. So just as a reminder, as you said, just to people that it's not just people coming out their door, they're for the most part coming out their door and going to a stop so they can be picked up. But that was one of the ways we could facilitate with a little less driver capacity.
Anyone else? Thank you, Jake. And it's you're right. It's an exciting time of year. Agenda item number 10 is to receive and potentially vote on the school committee meeting schedule for school year 22-23.
I do have a couple of notes I want to share in addition to your packet. So I have the first draft and we looked at some things just as a point of reference for you, just in case you want to add something or move something. There was an October 31st date, but there was also an immediately thereafter November because of 1st and 3rd. And so we pulled one of that last October date so that there's still 2 in October. But then you get into November, so it would either be back to back or we would have to have one in November. So I don't know if you want to add one, but the 3rd week that month is a holiday week. And so I just want to make sure you were aware of that. I also know this committee is willing to add a meeting if necessary. So I just didn't want it to be a surprise later. We also have one on the 14th that stays, and then we go pretty quickly to the 5th. So we start early in December. In January, on the initial draft or last year's version, we had something very early in January in the inauguration, but we don't have that this year because of the voting cycle. So if you're looking at last year and comparing, that's been pulled out. We also pulled out a retreat that happened in January because that's typically been for new folks. And it's not to say that we can't have a retreat. I actually think we could probably have one if we have some items that we'd like to discuss more deeply, like mission, vision, goals, those kinds of things. But I think we could add that as long as we give advance notice. So I didn't leave it in there in early January, but I'm open to having one actually at any point that you feel fit. Next note that I had gets down into April. And just as a reminder that there's a gap on which would have been the 3rd week in April because that's April break.
And Jake, are we going to move back here? But it says Connors, or are we going to continue to try to use Dingley as possible?
So I think I'd like to continue to use Dingley for things like student hearings, things like that as needed. I've been in conversation with Director Callahan and staff at the Green Ladle to talk about having meetings there. So if you look up after this meeting, we may start meeting at the Green Ladle, but during times that are not their peak season. So we'd like to avoid that holiday season where they do a lot of production, and also in around like the banquet season for sports. And so Director Callahan is working with that team to figure out what days might be problematic and what days we could go there, and trying to shift our regular public session meetings to the Ladle, having the smaller ones that we know at Dingley, and then starting to mix it up at schools now that we can gather again. And our new IT team has found ways to make it less cumbersome to move. So we're looking at that. We are still looking at other facilities, and I've talked with the city. We've looked at Callahan Hall. think the city chambers physically is big enough for public sessions, but the way their bench is set up is not quite big enough for us, and it's kind of narrow for us to squeeze in there. So if people have other ideas about meeting spaces, we're all ears, but I think the ladle here, if need be, Dingley when it's small, and then looking at going to schools again.
Great. Anything else from anyone as far as the dates? Ms. Ames?
Just a small thing. It looked like there's a whole month in October to November where we don't meet. Was that intentional? You did mention October 31st, but the early November seems to be gone. At least in the version I have here. Huh? October 17th to November 14th is a month. Was that intentional? It, you know,
Yeah, I think you're right. We missed one there, the first
yeah.
Monday in November, because we pulled the
We can always
31st.
not have- Yeah, right, exactly. And then in March, it's every week on the schedule.
Ms. Whitmore?
I would be okay with keeping it one meeting that month with like the holidays coming. But I guess if we have to have two, we could, but
We can always drop it, but it seems like that's a heavy season. I would think that would be a time when school things are coming to a head.
Yeah, I think it's just the way it landed. So if you look at the 31st is actually a Monday. And so the following Monday is the 7th of November. And then the one after is the 14th. And then we have the holiday. So I think that's why we landed at one. I'm okay with whichever the team would like.
I'm not insisting on another meeting. I just wanted to make sure we knew what we were doing.
Mhm. Yeah, I had to look at it to remember it.
So that would have made 3 in October and just the 1 in November.
Or back to back.
Right. Ms. Parks?
The 14th is when we're having a meeting. The 21st, there's a holiday that week, right?
Right.
So we couldn't do the 28th, so that we have two meetings in November? Oh, because then we're back to back again, 28th and the 5th. Okay, never mind.
We can modify it or we can leave it as is and add a meeting if we'd like. I'm okay with whatever the group would like.
I'm
Yes.
fine with leaving it as is.
Even as is.
Yeah.
I'll second
Ms.
that.
Whitlow?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I make a motion to approve the calendar as presented.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion or questions? Ms. Whitlow?
Yeah, I was just curious. I'm excited to see, I'm always excited to see the Green Ladle location and that we're having dinner. Just curious as to what that will be. Not the dinner itself, but like, is it a workshop? Like, what are we doing? Is this something new? Because I don't recall ever having like a in December committee dinner, but I don't need details, but I'm just curious if it's something specific.
So I think that's us bouncing around having a joint meeting with the city council, but we don't have that confirmed just yet. We did want to do something in the fall. Was also trying to avoid right in front of the election so that people can do their thing and not have it impact our meeting, but.
Anything else? So there's a motion on the floor to approve as presented. Any further discussion? All in favor? So moved. Agenda item number 11 is to review and potentially vote on the second reading of the following policy, JICJ, student use of cell phones and other electronic devices. Miss Paquette.
I don't have anything different from when we met last time, whenever that was. I think this was an opportunity for us to collect feedback and provide any of that feedback to the committee. And I believe Superintendent Langlis has the results of the survey.
I do, and I shared, I think 583 responses with you late last week. And then over the weekend, I checked again, we had 610. I looked through the new responses and they were very much the same. So I didn't resend additional information. But I think members of the committee may want to contribute also from their look over of the information. Before we dive too deep, I'd like to talk about the 9 to 12 piece and really looking at trying to set a tone that is workplace related, conditioning students for that next step where your teacher and the administrator is essentially your boss. You're here for school, just like you would be for work. And if you have your phone out when you should not, you get a reminder to put it away. And if you're not, there should be communication with home to let people know that this is happening. And then we would take next steps. I don't think the solution is to just send kids to the office constantly and creating a line at the door. I also don't think we should, be hands-on with cell phones with high school age students to take it away from them or anything like that. So I'd like to avoid the combative approach and take the approach of expectations and creating routines and trying to get that focus to be about the class that's in session and less about the battle over cell phones.
Ms. Bowden.
Thank you. So I really appreciate you sending all the responses to us. Just for the public's knowledge, there were 30 pages of responses that we received in our packet. I did go through and read every single one of them. But I also took a tally and I only made it 25 pages in, mostly because I ran out of room. But I will share the results of the tally that I took, just so the public understands why I'm voting the way I'm voting. Of the parents, I tallied 200 parents that were in favor of this and 96 that were not. Of our educators, I tallied 95 that were in favor of this and only 4 that were not. And then there were students and I have an other column, there are counselors, custodians, food service workers, grandparents. And in the other column, there was 16-0 in favor of the policy. And in the student section, I only saw 9 student responses. 7 were not in favor of the policy, 2 were in favor of the policy. And the 7 didn't really have very nice things to say to our committee about this. So for me, the things that I read over and over was concern about liability on the teacher's part on what happens if they take a cell phone away. Are they liable for that cell phone if it's damaged or broken? And also teachers feeling like the enforcement of this policy is going to be a challenge for them. And we certainly don't want to add more stress into an already stressful situation. But I do think that this policy is really a move in the right direction. The only edit that I would have for this and would want fixed is under section E, students who violate the school policy or school rules will be subject to disciplinary consequences, which may include, and item 1 makes it sound as if a phone is taken away, then a parent or a guardian is going to have to come pick that phone up at the end of the day. And I really think, if a phone's taken away, I think it should be given back to the student at the end of the day when they leave. I know I'm comfortable with that as a parent. I would want my student to get their cell phone back in their hands when they leave, so I'm able to communicate with them when they leave the school. And that's really the only piece of this that I would ask that we re-examine before it's passed. But I'm really open and looking forward to hearing what everyone else has to say. So thank you.
Ms. Eames.
I have a minor thing and then a bigger thing. The minor thing is under 9 to 12, the phrasing is a little odd. So I thought if we add the word only, it'll work. The use of electronic devices is authorized only during passing time and all lunches, unless it is determined to be essential for the student's health. Then the caveat makes some sense.
So yes, I did add only
Oh,
after our
good.
last discussion. and
Thank
I'm-
you. I
I'm not
thought we
sure-
had
I'm not
talked about
sure
it.
why that version is not the one that you have.
Thank
Sorry
you.
about that.
Thank you, because I know we had talked about that. The other thing is, the bigger thing is about, confiscation. No, let's start with this. The bigger thing for me is, how do you get permission to tape someone? Like, I don't think we've clearly delineated the way in which a student can gain permission to tape someone. And as mentioned in the comments from the public, there are other people in the background that you may not be getting permission from. So how is the school going to navigate that? So that's my first major question. Thank you.
I mean, my initial thinking is that students shouldn't be taping during the school day. And I think, so it could be as change in language, or we
Yep.
could go to a written consent.
Mhm.
Um,
I think not taping in the school day may be better language than written consent. Maybe easier to enforce.
mhm.
Mr. Bopala. Thank you. I emailed the committee members my findings, if you want to put that in quotation marks. I would like to share it with the general public, and some of the comments are very noteworthy. When I did this at up to, I think, 2:15 this afternoon, there were 598 responses, 416 parent and guardians, 157 educators, 9 students, which I found kind of noteworthy, 7 taxpayers, 3 nutrition people, and 1 each counselor, social worker, custodian, administrator, district employee, and office staff. And I found 4 themes. And again, I don't like doing this in a vacuum. Dr. Eames knows professionally that when you judge statistics and interpretation, you should have more than one set of eyes. But a parent that said a policy is only as good as it is enforced. And boy, we better make sure whatever policy we have, there are steps for enforcement. Another parent that made sense, it should be limited emergencies and lunch only. And an educator that showed concern, if I may quote from him briefly, amount of issues we see from fights being filmed, bullying, phone calls in the middle of class, watching videos or movies instead of working, kids call their parents to get out of a test or gym class. If they break the rules, there should be consequences. So once again, I'm using my caveat of having been a teacher in the classroom for parts of 6 decades, and would like to reiterate a couple things. It seems to me that many residents want LPS and its teachers to be proactive. Teachers should not be responsible for collecting phones. There's a better way than that, and certainly exception for emergencies for student health. A common theme is enforcement of it. I remind, again, the studies that I've done that effective deterrence must be swift, certain, and incremental. We don't have to chop the head off at the first time, obviously steps by steps. And there was one quote from an 817 parent that I would just like to abridge share that I think comes closest, but not exactly what I feel. From a parent, I am completely convinced that electronics from home should not be permitted during the school day unless deemed necessary by a parent or educator. I feel these devices are an interruption to the school day. As children get older, it becomes a distraction and quite possibly an addiction. Kids have increasingly used the internet for unsavory viewing, bullying, and activity without permission and the watchful eye of a parent and guardian. This is leading to big trouble, missing teens, overstimulation, risky behavior. The educational possibilities when these devices are used correctly are amazing. But I, for one, and again, this is from a parent, do not trust or feel that my underage children will always make good choices. I feel that if they have them on their person, they should be shut off during the day, the entire school day. When the last bell rings, let them have at it, as these devices are truly their possession that an adult has provided, and I cannot limit their choices. I've had a child be at the mercy of bullying, and he goes on to talk a little bit about that. The people that were bullying were dealt with, but unfortunately, these videos go viral, and yes, the kids create an embarrassing situation, anger, and in some instances could be suicidal. I feel the Lewiston school system should take a hard stand on this subject, or it will be a very unpopular decision. But I am, his words are hard ass, and don't cave to the crying, threats, and stomping through my house when electronics are taken away for bad behavior. Wouldn't it be nice if kids talked to each other instead of looking down at their phones, as well as having the opportunity to not focus on the next text or TikTok post? If babysitters, I'm sorry, excuse me, if, let's see, amazing what a little social experience brings to a person. I'm almost there. Thank you for your time. I would put money on the fact that teachers are driven nuts with electronics. Teachers should not have to be babysitters, nor should they be put in a position of having to fight with parents over. It is very troubling to me. I hope there is a middle ground. I know that not all parents feel that way. I do, and I am old school so to speak. We learn discipline and respect, two things lacking in today's society and being made worse by the internet. My opinion, not a popular, I know. I did want to enter that into the record because again, it may be the very eloquent, certainly more than I could have created, statement on why there needs to be this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Ms. Hurd.
Thank you. So looking over the responses, I saw a lot of parents that were concerned about their child not having their phone for a safety issue, if there was an emergency or something like that. And I think these parents forget that at one point during their children's LPS or school career, they did not have a phone on them. So I have a first grader and a pre-Ker, and neither of them have a phone that they will be bringing to school with them. And I put my trust in our LPS staff to keep my children safe. And I think these parents are forgetting that our teachers and staff are not only there to teach them, but to keep them safe. So a fear for them that they're sending their child into a school that they won't be protected because they have a cell phone, I think is a little concerning. A thing that I did see a few responses were parents that said they will still be allowing their child to bring their phone. Their child will still be able to have that phone on them in their person and be able to use it during class. And my concern there is, what about these students? So if your parent is telling you to keep your phone on you, you're allowed to have it on you, and they take it out in class, are they then going to be punished because they're only following through with what their parent told them to do? So I think we need to potentially look at that also as well. And I don't want every student to say, well, my parent told me I could, to get away with it. But I think we need to also, again, kind of what Mr. Beauplant was saying, is take things step by step and look at all scenarios when it comes to it, because we need to do what's best for our students. And I could never see punishing a student or penalizing a student because they're just following through with what their parent or guardian told them to do. Thank you.
So this came up numerous times over the summer. We started talking about this back in June, and we've put it out there in public. I think we'll struggle. There'll be a handful of people that feel that way. The school committee can set policy. That's the responsibility of the committee. And I would also add that I often sit with parents whose children have been in some kind of physical altercation. And I've heard parents say, well, if someone looks like they're going to hit my child, I've told them to hit them first or hit them back. And I try to coach parents through that moment and say, it's never okay to hit. Violence not acceptable. It is not acceptable. And so we work towards resolving those things. And I, again, try to coach people through it. But I would, while that's a bit of an extreme example, I feel like this is the same. If the expectation is there in school committee policy, public has had ample opportunity to weigh in and share their thoughts. We have an elected group that gets to cast a vote. And so we will do our best to implement the policy that is set forth. So, but I can hear those concerns.
Ms. Scott.
Thank you. So first off, I just want to say I really appreciate the amount of response that we got for this. I pushed for it last time and I was happy to see that many pages that we had to read through. And I did read through them too. It was quite a few. A couple that stuck out to me, and I just want to reaffirm that there is language already in this policy. There was one particular comment that referenced a child with special needs and the need for that child to have their phone and the use of that phone. But my opinion is that would come under what we've already said, is if it's a medical reason that that child can keep that phone. Another thing that I noticed when this first came out, there were some comments on social media around a child's Fourth Amendment right and our right to have and our freedom and all this other stuff. And I want to reiterate that if you look at this policy, it is cross-referenced with our policy already that we have on questioning searches of students and everything else that we have in place already, so that a child is just not, the phone's not just going to be grabbed and a gym teacher's not just going to be looking through somebody's phone and at their pictures or something to that effect. That being said, I think that there are a couple points that were brought up by Member Bowden and Member Eames that I would like to go back to on. In respect to number 1, confiscation of the device, I really think that that's an important point that I think it should go back as well at the end of the day. My question is, are we ready to put this into place if there's probably still some language that may have to go around that particular piece? Also, in the part where you said that there's going to be some warnings, if we're having teachers or staff members give a warning to the child, and maybe that should be language that's in there also, that it shows so that our parents know, the staff knows. Some staff is feeling, in the comments that I saw and some staff members that I've spoken to, that this is going to be another thing on their plate that they have to do. So if we have something in place in respect to what the warning is going to be, and so that the parents know that the teachers now said, you need to turn that phone off during this class. That doesn't happen. And is it 2 in place? And then that teacher is emailing the parent saying, your child has now had 2 warnings to turn their phone off. We have this new policy in place. At this point, you either have to have that conversation with them or we will have to confiscate that phone during school times. I'm not sure exactly how that language looks, but I think that we need to include that in there so that we have all of that in place before we vote it in. This is, with any policy, with anything that we do, we're not going to be able to please everybody. It's unfortunate. I wish we could. I wish we could find the exact answer for every different situation, but there is a different situation for all sorts of things. And we do have policies in place, and that is our role, to put those policies in place. And I think it's really important for people to understand and the public to understand that this conversation didn't come about haphazardly or just out of the blue, that we have seen some serious situations with electronic devices in our schools. It has actually become a concern nationwide, and many school boards across the country are discussing this, as well as administrations. And I think that we're taking a proactive step. Will it be perfect to begin with? Probably not. Will we have to look at this again as we go through the school year and we see how it works? I think that's possibly the case. And I hope that we will get conversations from parents and staff members to continue this conversation, so we're prepared to do any kind of changes that need to be done. But I also hope that the community understands that this is something that we need to do. And I feel very strongly about it. I had 4 kids go through school. I have 4 grandkids or grandchildren now in school. My kids never had a phone. My grandkids don't have a phone. They know that there is an office if they need to use it. Even when my kids, now maybe I'm a harsh parent, I'm pretty strict with my rules, but even through high school, my kids were told you cannot have your phone at school. They came home and they got their phones. They had it when they went to their jobs. They had it when they were out on the road. They had it when they were out with their friends. They had it on the weekends. But when they went to school in the morning, they didn't have their phone. And that's where I stand.
Ms. Parks?
Thank you. I have a few points. Some of them are just sort of housekeeping. On section A, paragraph 3, either needs to be reworded or removed because it's either redundant or contradictory. The first paragraph is K through 8 and it says when the devices are allowed. And then the second paragraph is 9 through 12 and it says that they are allowed with the word only added. But then the third paragraph goes back to saying that they're prohibited again. And so it either needs to be clarified that they're prohibited in K through 8, or it needs to be taken out because that language is repetitive from paragraph A, or it's, something needs to change there because it's contradictory to the previous paragraph. Do you want a second to read that? I'll stop talking.
Yeah, I think you're raising a good point. It almost feels like it should be, prohibited items include, and then just kind of say it almost like.
Those are listed under K-8 already.
Like,
I
okay,
think we just didn't remove it from the sample one that we started with. Am I good to move on or still?
yeah. So yes, I actually, as I'm looking at this again, feel like it should probably just be pulled. I don't know that it needs to be there at all.
Or
This
it needs
is-
to go back to saying K-8 or something, because it confuses the previous paragraph of the 9 through 12.
I put a line through it on,
Okay.
on the Google drafts, the draft that I have, the working draft that I have.
All right, in the section where it talks about searching, which I didn't write down what section that is. Paragraph C, student cell phones and other electronic devices may be subject to search if there is reasonable suspicion of a violation. I think that we need to clarify that a little bit, and maybe, I know that it's cross-referenced in other policies, but specifically add that right there, that this will be how we've already practiced, like we've already done that. But I think it should also limit it to administrators or the SRO when it's appropriate for the searching. I don't think just any random person should be searching a student's phone. So clarifying some of that.
I think it's a good point. There are thresholds for school administration to search items. And so those exist in legal language that should probably reference that. Student cell phones and other electronic devices may be subject to search if there's reasonable suspicion of violation in accordance with law.
Right, something along those lines.
Mhm.
And then I think section E 1 through 5 needs a little bit more clarity. I don't know if that's itemizing accurate progressive discipline steps, like there'll be a warning, then there'll be this, then there'll be that, and like spelling those out specifically. But I know at least one comment in the parent comments that we got, they understood that to mean if their child is spoken to 5 times, it's going to be a referral to law enforcement, the way it's written. And we don't want people to think that their kid brings their phone out in school 5 times, they're going to jail. That's not what we want, the message we want to send. So I think adding some language clarifying the progressive steps would be good there.
Yeah. The hard thing with that one is the may include, and a referral to law enforcement would really only be for activities that would be potentially criminal. So a student walking down the hall the 5th time with being told to put their phone away, calling law enforcement is not going to be where we land with that, certainly. But I do think it's important that we consider how we phrase that, because we have had things that we really never seen before show up on students' phones. And we have had some people say to us, well, it's not the school's business to report these things. And as mandated reporters, we do have things we need to report. And we've had situations that have led to mandated report. And we've had some parents not be so happy that we reported it. So I don't even know that it has to be here, but I do think it's important for people to know that that would be connected to activity that falls under mandated reporting. So, and not just, I had my phone up. So I think it's an excellent point. It's not a progression as that reads.
I have 2 more points, I think, if that's okay. Maybe just adding the words and or at the end of each 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it could be and or any of those things, not that it's in this order. But I do think adding a line there that says there'll be a first warning, that kind of stuff is important. I think that, and I don't know if this is language that needs to be included or if it's just what we relay to staff, but I think if a student takes their phone out to record something or take a picture of something out of fear, like somebody is bullying them and they're trying to get evidence, or if somebody is coming to assault them, I don't think that a student should be punished for that. And I don't know if that can be incorporated into the language. If somebody's trying to protect themselves, or if it's an emergency or something they perceive as an emergency, I think that that should be understandable.
Yeah, I think those are so situational. I leave that to administrative discretion for that kind of implementation, at least in my mind, but I'm open to thoughts. But none of these situations are really, some of them are black and white, but a lot of them, when they get to levels of extreme, they're not necessarily black and white. But certainly we wouldn't want to pursue a student who's been a victim of something.
I agree that phones should be returned to students at the end of the day. If a kid's going home to an empty house, they should have their phone. So I agree with what Ms. Bowden said about that. And my last point is if this ends up leading, if we get a lot of feedback that this is leading to bigger distractions in the classroom, like teacher enforcement is taking up a big part of the classroom time, or we hear that there's inconsistent enforcement from one classroom to the next, I think that we should definitely bring it back and reevaluate the situation within a couple months. So just sort of do a check-in 2 months in or 3 months in and see where it's at and go from there. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Bowpower. Thank you. I'd like to address, what Ms. Park said about, taking up valuable classroom time, dealing with this. And I had one quote from a teacher: "I can't spend all day, every day arguing with students over cell phones." Well, why are you? Again, the concept of assertive discipline. You have two choices: either do what I request, or here's the consequence. And it's stated and they know it. Another teacher: "Well, they take them to the bathroom." You want to go to the bathroom? Put your cell phone on my desk. You establish these things at the beginning. You come on strict as a teacher, and then you can loosen up rather than trying to be everybody's friend and then try to get control. It's almost like a sacrificial lamb theory. You make an example and there's a message that's being sent. If they want to take the message, fine, that's the purpose. If not, again, consequences. I never broke a sweat dealing with cell phones. On the same token, I had two students on opposite ends of the room, which I knew they didn't get along, and they surreptitiously texted each other saying, "I'll meet you in the bathroom, we'll settle this." And I was looking for it and I couldn't see it. They are very good at communicating if they need to. So it's not going to be a quick fix. It's not going to be a panacea for all the woes that we're looking at, but it is a solid start to, again, maintain control, increase learning time and everything else, and just try to put a problem to minimize it. Thank you. Ms. Bowden.
Thank you. While everyone was talking, I actually had a couple more thoughts that I knew I didn't write down, but I do think it's worth sharing. One, I did have an arts teacher from Lewiston High School reach out. And one of the things in that particular classroom that goes on during art class is students are allowed to listen to their own music, which to me is like a creative process with art. And so I'm wondering if there is some sort of language in that respect that we could put in. I know it's like murky, but I don't know how you'd add that in, but I think students are able to put in their earbuds and listen to music in that particular class. Is that covered? I just want to make sure that that's covered.
It's covered. Yeah.
Educational purposes. Okay, perfect. The second thing I wanted to bring up is a lot of well, not a lot, but there were quite a few comments from parents that talked about grouping the middle school level with the high school level as far as the restrictions go, because the high school is a little more lenient. And I totally disagree with those comments personally. I think one of the whole reasons this came about is because of how abused cell phones were at the middle school level. And so I think it's super important. I just want to clarify that, like, it's super important that, we are grouping the middle school with the younger grades, not with the older grades. They're not ready for that responsibility. Every teacher that I spoke to, every middle school teacher I spoke to, said the same thing. It was a disaster. The final thing that I have written down is kind of piggybacks off what Ms. Park said. And that is, I do think that there should be language saying, that we have one warning from a teacher before, a parent is contacted or a device is taken away for the rest of the class. I agree. I think a lot of members have said that, you get a warning, and if you continue to not listen, well, then there'll be a consequence. And that's what this policy is all about. So yeah, thank you.
Ms. Eames.
Thank you. The school committee sets policy and the superintendent and the staff implements it. And I think that a lot of the fine tuning here can be left to the staff to figure out exactly what a first warning is and what are the sequence of consequences. I don't think that's our job. Our job is to write clear policy that then can be enforced. So I think this is almost there. I mean, it's very, very close. I think there is a tweak that needs to be clarified in E about the increasing cascade of consequences. Something, that, but I think otherwise we're almost there. Thank you very much.
Ms. Whitlow.
I have things to say, but I'm having a coughing attack. So yeah, I definitely want to thank all the parents, staff, students who responded. Some of the, I went back through the policy. I've got a lot of notes. I want to highlight some things. So the first page, A, when it comes to the devices must be turned off and stored during the school day unless it's determined to be essential for students' health, safety. I don't know how we determine that besides a 504 or an IEP. So I want to make sure that that's clear. If somebody says they have anxiety, well, I guess you should have a 504 plan. I don't know. I mean, like, how do we determine that? I think you guys can figure that out. I just want that to be very clear. I would expect that lots of parents could say, well, my kid has a lot of anxiety and they need it, but is it documented, or maybe a doctor's note or whatever it has. So I think that's great. I just want parents to know that. Some other things. Okay, so in B, so the use of cameras, including camera phones, is strictly prohibited in locker rooms, bathrooms, and other places where privacy is generally expected. In all other school locations, permission must be obtained from staff or administration. It can't be obtained from another student before photographing. I think that was one concern that somebody had before was, well, who can give that permission? But I think we kind of addressed that. Video or audio recording another person. Okay. Unless, and I think we've also touched on this, unless it is used for the safety of yourself or others. But I think there needs to be like another caveat to that, saying consequences will not be enforced if photo, audio, video is taken for evidence and is handed over to authorities. So if you're taking video for protection, but you're not using it for evidence and you're not handing it over when someone asks, then yeah, that should be a consequence because they're going to probably use that for something else later. So I just want to touch on that. I think there was one of the comments I remember is from a parent that says, like, I want to be able to get in touch with my kid if there's an emergency at home. Well, I don't know what your kid is going to be able to do at school if there's an emergency at home. So I don't know if that's necessary. You can find the phone number to the school, call the school. If there's an emergency, you got to pick your child up. But your kid is not going to save the day. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. So another point, okay, another point is searching the phone and administrators seeing maybe some nude photos, something that is not appropriate. I just want to say this, if parents and students are afraid that their nude photos are going to be seen by administration, then delete them before you come to school, because there's always going to be that potential that someone can see those photos. So I'm sorry, parents, but that's the way it should be. I know that people have talked about the Fourth Amendment, and I just want to be clear also that the Fourth Amendment prohibits unreasonable searches. And it's not a guarantee against all searches, but only those that are deemed unnecessary. So if I think there's a fine line between if I don't know, someone's dealing drugs and they have text messages where they're going to meet somebody at the school, and we think that's reasonable to search their phone to get evidence, then yes. But if you see something else that they're doing that doesn't pertain to that, then we can't use that against the child to discipline them, you know. So I think there's a fine line. So Fourth Amendment rights are great. They protect you when need be, but you know, staff, administrators searching isn't always a protected Fourth Amendment right. So that's all I have. But I think we can make this work. I don't know if we want to tweak it tonight so that we can have it for the first day of school. I would love to see something solid before we walk out of here tonight.
Ashley,
So first I want to thank everybody that reached out and gave their input. It was really helpful to read all the different perspectives. One thing I do want to touch on is something that Ms. Bowden mentioned about you know, some parents wanting the middle school kids to be grouped with the high school kids. And a lot like what Ms. Bowden said, you know, I think that is really what made us actually look into this policy. As a mother of a kid that's going into middle school, and you know, I know how much of a distraction the phones can be, but I also do think it's really important for us to educate the kids. I mean, knowledge is power. So I think that we need to let them know the effects of social media, how this can follow you forever. You know, don't just say, you know, nope, you can't have it. Why? Give them an understanding and how is this going to affect their life, you know? Not just because, exactly. So I don't know if somebody can develop something that can work with just a lot like we did, bike safety, bullying, all those things. This is really, really important. And I'm totally in favor of this. Sorry, kids, but I am. So that's all.
We did share in a message today, and I think this will continue to be sprinkled throughout, that just some tips around just student safety. You know, in these different stages of development. So we're talking about school and the distraction and the disruption, but we also have students who are on their phone messaging or scrolling all hours of the night. So they're not getting sleep. And I dare to say that I don't know how old I was when my father said, you know, nothing good happens after midnight, or nothing good happens after 10 p.m. You know, on a school night, nothing good really happens after 8 p.m. unless you're doing homework or you're just thinking about what's coming up. But what we saw as a cycle of what I would call vicious communication by kids who I'm not even sure understand the words that they were putting out there at 10, 11, midnight, and then parents showing up with their children in the morning and saying, look what my child has been exposed to. They can't come to school now because they're embarrassed, feel inadequate, depressed, stressed. And these things are going on at midnight. And so we're trying to share this, not just from a school policy, you know, here's the rule and order piece, but also from an education perspective. The phone data capability now has drastically changed in the last 5 years. Students used to get the hand-me-down phones, and if they could get on a network, they could maybe stream things through the internet, but they didn't have data service. But data service now is much less expensive in many cases, and the phones can do it all. So we used to have this kind of natural deterrent in our schools because kids couldn't get on certain parts of the internet or it was filtered. So it wasn't that much fun because they couldn't watch Netflix in class or do certain things. And then students looked at bypassing that network to a certain extent because of newer technologies. But now we have students who they'll turn off the internet and just stream using their data because their family has an unlimited plan. So we're trying to share tips with people so they realize the things their students are doing, you know, how you can check a student's phone to see the apps that they used all day long and then deleted on the bus before they got home. So prove to you that your student was on this all day long and here's the log, that stuff exists, you know, and so we can look at those things and just trying to support parents who I think want to know more of the tools available to them outside of school, you know, and challenging family to, you know, eat together in the evening. And then don't use your phones. Anybody, not the adults, not the kids, and just engage as a family or as a household on how the day was. So maybe just an old traditionalist and getting older, but to me, there's just so many valuable components to this overall message that would benefit our kids and our community. And to be frank, when they go into the workforce, which is what we're trying to prepare them to do, to be able to focus in college, get those things done, to focus in their apprenticeship program so they're prepared for a higher paying wage, and being productive, with all those soft skills. And one of the things we hear repeatedly from employers now is you're graduating kids who have free access to college because of different funding sources, and we can't get them to there on time, which ironically phones have an alarm, and we can't get them off their phone while they're there. So we can't pay them to keep doing this. So I think it's a holistic approach that we'll have to take. So thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate it.
Mr. Beaupont.
Thank you. I share Ms. Whitlow's concern and the rest of the committee about unlawful or unreasonable search and seizure. I think our 18, starting with Jake and all the way down, have to be legal experts. I refer to a Supreme Court case, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Jake, New Jersey versus TLC, where a girl's purse was searched because she supposedly had cigarettes. Turns out there was also marijuana. This is back in the 70s in it, and she was expelled, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court, and she got reinstated. So we have to be very careful on that. Thank you.
Ms. Parks?
I'm looking at the revised version that Karen just sent out to us, around the confiscation of the device until arrangements can be made to hand off the device to a parent or guardian whenever possible. If we just, or confirmation that the parent is okay with returning it to the student, at least that way, like they can make the school can make contact with the parent and say, do you want us to hold on to this until you pick it up, or do you want us to return it to the student? Something along those lines, because some parents may want to take the hard line with it and say, no, don't give that back to my student, or my child. So I don't know if just confirming with the parent that you can return it to the student, or verbal permission to return to the student, something that at least confirms with the parent that the phone had been taken away.
Anyone else? Well, I haven't said much. And I, like many older folks, I struggle with some of this technology. I just think that this policy is something that we really have to do. And if nothing else, we have to find a way to get buy-in from the parents. I think parents are, so many people are, it has to be this instantaneous communication. I see in our work that all of this distraction of cell phones, we're raising a generation of distracted employees who stand a far better chance of getting hurt on the job and who are far less productive because they just cannot get away from that cell phone. In my own business, I've had opportunity to actually take phones away from employees and told them, that you want this back, you come see me in the office at the end of work. And I've had guys say, you can't do that. And I said, well, you know what? Then you can go home. There are consequences for this. When you're not working and you think you're going to get paid for it, in the workforce, people cannot put up with it. It is become so endemic, this just addiction to this thing with the thumbs, that it's just ridiculous. And where we're seeing it in our business is in the most recent graduates. They're the worst. And we don't need to continue to raise a crop of just a crop of distracted, unproductive workforce that refuses to work like they're expected. There are consequences, and I've inflicted it on folks that work for me and they don't like it. But when you do it once, it usually solves it for the other 6 guys that were doing it as well. We have a policy that, if you've got a cell phone and you need it because it's a work-related thing, it's one thing. If it's not related to work, leave it in your lunchbox. You can use it at break, you can use it at lunch, you can use it on the way home. But, we have rules against using cell phones, while you're driving. I mean, that's law. I mean, we're not asking for them we're not asking for them not to have it. We're asking for them to use it in an appropriate manner. And using earbuds in class, I'm sorry, I don't buy that. I don't care what the class is. You do better if you're concentrating on what you're doing. That's just another means of distraction where you don't, we've had it happen on job sites where someone else gets hurt and people that are wearing earbuds walk right past them because they can't hear them yelling for help. It is not appropriate. And it's downright dangerous on some jobs. And when you get so that you're so ingrained that you can't give it up, you probably shouldn't be doing that job. And that's a limiting factor that nobody wants to admit, but I've seen it. So as far as I'm concerned, we need to put this policy in place. And we need to ensure the fact that every staff member, every teacher, and everybody in the schools understands it and enforces it universally. There can be no nice guys. It's not what we hired them for. It's not why they're there. Ms. Scott?
Thank you. I was just reading, I'm going through, I'm seeing that you're adding a little bit more on that section B. I would like to see that we could approve this and vote on this evening. I'm liking the changes that have been made. I think with everything that we see now in red, we've been very cognizant to the comments that we've received, both personally through our emails and through that survey. I think this is really good.
Would you like me to share what's in red out loud so that everybody? According to the requests and feedback, we've actually changed, this was a Megan in my ear suggestion, we've changed it to pre-K through 8 instead of K through 8 since we have pre-K students. And Ms. Heard referenced having a pre-K student. We removed the third paragraph, if you will, as Ms. Parks pointed out, it is redundant. I think it was left there in error. In B, we added that permission for recording using the camera on the phone. So it says the use of cameras, including camera phones, is strictly prohibited in the locker rooms, bathrooms, and other places where privacy is generally expected. In all other school locations, permission must be obtained from staff or administration before photographing, video, or audio recording another person, unless it is for safety, and is turned into the appropriate staff as soon as reasonably possible. Under C, this was around the search, the searching of devices by administration, and it was we added in accordance with the law. Under D, and on your original one, E was there, it should have been D. We have added the warning and then or. To the confiscation. So number 2, we've added per Ms. Bowden's suggestion that the device can be handed off to a parent or guardian or to the student with parent or guardian permission whenever possible, as well as or a conference with the student's parents, guardian, or exclusion of the device from school or for an extended period of time, or penalties up to suspension or expulsion from school, depending upon the nature and circumstances of the violation and the student's prior disciplinary record, or has been added. And then for the last piece, referral to law enforcement if the content warrants mandated reporting or deemed necessary for safety purposes has been added.
Ms. Bowden.
I would like to make a motion to pass this or adopt this policy as amended. Thank you.
Mr. Beauparlant. Second. So we have a motion by Ms. Bowden, seconded by Mr. Beauparlant. Further discussion, Ms. Parks.
Just one tiny thing that I just noticed while she was reading it. For number 6, referral to law enforcement or appropriate authorities, because mandated reporting isn't necessarily reported to the law enforcement, just that one tiny detail.
That's in the last one.
And I'm still fine with the motion with that added.
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Eames.
Friendly amendment, the whenever possible in D2 seems out of place. It makes it seem like you're really trying to give it back to the student whenever possible. And I think if we just move that or to a different place, confiscation of device until arrangements can be made to hand off the device whenever possible to a parent or guardian or to the student when, minor point, just move it. Yep.
Mr. Bopalant.
Okay, I'll be quick. I just want to share the amazement, I think, of every member of the panel and our guests from the third estate that there is no public comment. I thought this place would be packed tonight and that there'd be lines out the door and there'd be something that would be, a little dicey, but nobody. Thank you.
Ms. Parks.
I have a question on Miss Eames' suggestion. So the way that's worded now, the only way the phone is returned is either to a parent or guardian or to the student with parent permission. So there's no returning it to the student at the end of the day unless there's parent permission. The way it's worded now, it doesn't give that option to just make the decision to return it to the student. Whenever possible after parent or guardian permission, and if it's not possible to get parent or guardian permission, you can still return it to the student.
I think even if we pull it and they're both in there, it gives people the discretion to say, listen, this is your first time, second time, take your phone. But remember, next time I might hold it until I can get a hold of a parent.
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges we have in particular, there's a serious lack of public transportation. And there are many parents who are working and who wouldn't have the ability to come and get a phone at the end of the school day, especially repeatedly. So I think, being able to contact a parent and say, is it okay to give this back? I think is probably the most efficient and the safest way, because there are many latchkey kids, we know it. And, if that is what they need to check in with their parent at the end of the day, yeah, I'm home, I'm good. That's one thing, but for them to not be able to let a parent know that they got home okay, I think that would could create some stress and issues for parents as well as the students. So I think the way it's written now makes sense.
Can I clarify what you are asking to add? So we had to hand off the device to a parent or guardian or to the student with parent or guardian permission whenever possible. Are we asking to just remove the permission for parents and just give it to the student?
Sorry, no, I was just trying to get the words whenever possible out or in the right place. It just was modifying the wrong clause. That's all. It was wordsmithing.
Ms. Parks.
So is whenever possible staying in there? So whenever possible to return it to the parent or whenever possible to contact the parent, when either of those are possible. Otherwise, it'll just be returned to the student directly. Is that correct? Miss Eames, is that? Okay. Maybe it just needs a comment after permission, whenever possible. Yeah, with the comma now, whenever possible, modifies both of them. Okay, sorry, I don't mean to be a grammar.
Ms. Whitlow.
Yes, you do, Megan. Yeah, God, I don't know why that was so funny. So I just want to make sure that this isn't going to be a battle with who is going to have these phones, the office, if they get taken away, right? Like whoever's at the office, I just want to make sure that there's not a, well, I'm going to do this and you don't have a say. Like, I feel like it's not clear, I guess.
I think the situations can vary, but I think that holding a phone for the day, I think there's a lot of flexibility there. I think in some of the lower levels where you're with that teacher all day, it might be an easier thing, especially with younger students. I think the older the kids get, the more likely it'll be that it's with an administrator or the office for the remainder of the day, and the kids will have to come back and get it.
Ms. Scott?
So on that particular point, I think that's where member Eames was kind of talking about, this is more an administrative thing. And I think that, it, just so the public understands, it is not easy to wordsmith a policy like this just off the cuff and for all of us to do this. So this is quite impressive in my opinion. Of the 10 years that I've sort of been doing this stuff, this is pretty impressive that we could do this like this. I really like what we see here, but I think that when we're talking about how the administration is going to handle it, when we're asking some of those more specific, that goes back to Megan Parks's point of, we need an update. I think that, we make it a point tonight to say that, let's give this a couple of months. We would like to have an update. How's the administration feel about this? What has been parental response to this? Has there been any backlash? Those sorts of things. And if we could have an update, that's when we'll know where we're going, how it's happening, and what we may need to change.
And I guess the one thing that I would question is how, if we pass this tonight, how we get this distributed to the public and to staff. Because we're 2 days away from starting school. The first week is always going to be chaotic under the best of circumstances. But I think if we're going to start the school year off right, we need to make sure that all the staff and that the public knows that this is the policy. I'm just wondering how best to. I know Jake can do one of these email or these blasts where everybody can see it. I just don't know how well that. I don't know if that's 100% effective or not. Although they all seem to catch it when he does it for the buses. So.
We can push it out, but I will also say that we reviewed the first read of this word for word with our management team, which is all of our principals and directors. And I told them that it would be a topic of discussion tonight and maybe adopted. So they are prepared to roll this out. And I think consistency is key, but I also think consistency amongst spaces is key. You might walk through a shop at LRTC and see a student on his phone because they're looking up a part number and ordering things from Napa. So there are spaces where one might deem it educationally appropriate and others might not. But I think if it's consistent amongst that space for that purpose, those things would be fine. And I think that when we do the follow-up, I put it in my notes to do a follow-up later this fall. I think it's important to do a follow-up, but I also think it's important to just get a pulse on how things are going, and is to not make it not to make it a battle. It's about approach. I don't want teachers to feel like they have to walk around a classroom and try to wrestle phones from students. That's not the purpose of this. It's really about that preparedness for the next step. There's a series of steps here now that can be followed. Communication with home is powerful. I encourage teachers to do so. And I think we can roll this out.
Ms. Bowden?
Thanks. I just wanted to check too, since we talked about it last time, like an acknowledgement form for parents to sign. Is that something that we're still going to do and send home on the first day of school?
So I drafted one and shared it with the survey as a link. I didn't get any feedback, at least didn't see any specific feedback about the acknowledgement form. I did create one if we want it to go out to families. I don't know that needs to be adopted in policy, but it can be something that is disseminated as part of this effort to get the word out.
That's what I was going to say. Since the chair brought that up, how are we going to really let everybody know now that we're 2 days away? I just think that acknowledgement form and parents signing off on it is pretty important because Mr. Beauplant's talked about that before too. You can come back and say, well, you signed it, so I think that is very important. So yeah, thanks.
Ms. Parks?
I don't know about the other schools, but I know the middle school principal sent out a newsletter this week, and she included that this was being discussed tonight and this is potentially what the policy was going to be. So I think that newsletters, open house, things like that will be the best way to get it out to families.
Ms. Hurd?
Thank you. For the acknowledgement, if we send it out, is it possible to also do like an electronic? Because maybe some parents work odd hours, they don't necessarily see their kids, or it's not left down on the counter or whatever. Is there a way to also do like electronic instead of the old like? Yeah, is there any way to offer like just another option other than just paper?
Are you saying you think it'd be something you'd want to do with your cell phone?
Yeah, we can look at that. I think we have some ideas on that. Certainly possible.
Ms. Whitlow?
So D6, I know that Megan had made some word changes, but I think there's still something that we need to do. So it says referral to law enforcement or appropriate authorities if the content warrants mandated reporting or is deemed necessary for safety purposes. But what if it's like criminal act or something else? There seems to be something missing from that. Like, you wouldn't just refer to law enforcement for content that warrants mandated reporting or for safety purposes. Or so I think there's something else that could possibly go there. It might not even matter. So that's okay. The acknowledgement form, does there have a spot on there for like a parent phone number? Because I know that people update their phone numbers at the beginning of the year. They don't always update it. And we know that we're going to have to call parents. And we're really, I think, would need a phone number or best way to contact parents, because we know that parents change phone numbers a lot, or maybe even email. I don't know. But I'm just curious if there's like a contact info section on those acknowledgement forms.
Ms. Hurd?
Thank you. So just coming from open house, when we went, and I don't know if they do this in the middle or the high school, but you get the blue form with all your contact information on it, and they ask you to like update it inside.
Told you that, said that.
Right, but so why would we need a spot on the acknowledgement form?
Because many times parents don't update those, or their number changes on a regular basis, or there's probably a lot of reasons why that information form isn't going to be up to date. So I'm just saying it's another way to say, hey, verify that this is your phone number.
So we do have a motion on the floor. Unless there are other comments or changes we want to make to this, the motion is to approve this policy JICJ with the changes and wordsmithing that we've done. That was motioned by Ms. Bowden and it was seconded by Mr. Beauparlant. If there's nothing further, Ms. Bowden?
Sorry, I just want for the public to know that one more thing was added in just now to D6. Referral to law enforcement or appropriate authorities if the content warrants mandated reporting, violates law, or is deemed necessary for safety purposes. So I just feel like that needed to be said out loud before we go ahead and vote on this.
Mr. Beauparlant, are you all right with that change? Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So it's a motion. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to everyone who helped with the survey and everyone. And we will hope for the best, as this is a policy to get our schools back under, doing what we're supposed to do. Get them under control and be teaching to an undistracted audience. Agenda item number 12 is to review and potentially vote on the teacher and ed tech intervention positions, a reallocation. Mr. Lang also.
So returning to this from our last meeting where we introduced it, but wanted to put some words to paper on it so that you could give it some thought and be thinking about it. A couple of highlights to this that I want to mention in addition to the memo. The reentry work already exists. And so students who are hypothetically expelled with services, we are already doing reentry work with those individuals. They already have tutors, they already have online resources. We sometimes struggle to find a teacher to provide certain things, so we coordinate that as best we can as a district. We use community-based organizations, various places. We use our own staff. We use some other folks that are qualified to do so. So I guess I wanted to be upfront with these large in part are services we already have to provide that we do pay for. And so one way or another, we'll be paying for those services. The idea behind this, I think, allows us to coordinate it better with someone who's got a dedicated responsibility to be a teacher of record. I was recently looking at some of the students who were expelled last year for reentry for this year. As you all know, we have a meeting coming up to look at that. But there's a handful of kids that have done nothing. And we've tracked them and we've invited them to meetings and we've made phone calls and we've sent letters, and they just haven't engaged, which is always my fear. I think in that process, but certainly they've earned that space. So I think this would allow us to have a little more intentionality around that. I think that's important. So the other nice piece to this, if we go this route, is that, and I know I mentioned community-based organizations. Tree Street currently has a staff that is a certified educator and an ed tech. And so this wouldn't be pulling from our current, I'll say diminished staff pool. This would be staff that are not currently ours, that in other frames wouldn't intend to be Lewis Public School staff. However, this would be Lewis Public School staff. And I think I mentioned in here too, that from a supervisory perspective, this would be underneath Philip Johnston, who's the administrator at Next Step. But I also want to be clear, there's a dotted line connection to our special education program, and Cassie Delcourt, who helps with some of our reentry programming to make sure that we meet the needs of students. So there's two layers to that. I put in here that the funding could be a reallocation from existing dollars or from ESSER, because we have some positions that were approved by ESSER to help keep students engaged throughout the pandemic and then beyond. And we've been unable to fill them because anyone interested in that role, we've said, we need you in a classroom. So we have approved dollars there. And if this language fits that criteria, which I believe this one would, it gives us an opportunity, again, sunsetting funds, but it would be a reallocation of existing funds. And you've seen those plans, but it's still a reallocation of existing LPS funds, whether it was taxpayer dollars directly here locally or taxpayer dollars from the ARP funds. So that's the intent of this. And I think it has some value. I think it's a way to try to scoop up some of those kids that might need an intervention before they're before you for disciplinary purposes. It might be that student who has a different condition that's got nothing to do with disciplinary, but they need connection to school in the interim. And I think this would grant us the flexibility to not only have a teacher of record and an ed tech, which meets the criteria to do certain programming, but also to have someone dedicated to allocating resources like Bates tutors and just that kind of planning component of not just Bates, but any organization that helps with tutoring and other sites. So this would help with that. And one other piece is, of course, with parent permission, which would be required in writing, they have transportation capability. So they could go pick students up and bring them back, which has been an ongoing challenge, especially for students who are expelled, because we don't provide that service once a student reaches that place. So.
Ms. Bowden?
Thank you. I'm just wondering, is this something we could like do like a preliminary approval of just to see how it goes for the first year? I'm just looking at the positions and the cost and wondering, if this is something that, doesn't seem to be making a difference, then, maybe this is something that we come back and look at and decide, that didn't work. Let's take a different approach. I just don't want to be locked into, or I don't want our budget to be locked into something that possibly we're not going to be able to afford moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I am looking at this as a pilot piece, and I don't want to mislead people. These are taxpayer dollars. They're not new taxpayer dollars, and I'm not presenting this as a new position for you to approve as much as that pilot and an allocation. Again, it's still taxpayer dollars, but it's right now currently unspent because of some openings. So it shouldn't trigger a new burden for taxpayers unless you see it before you during the budget process from this approach.
Ms. Eames?
Thanks. I am in favor of this, but I do have one caveat. I think having it as a interim or a plan for at least 1 year and then revisit it would be good. Because as I said last time, there are members of the community who resist Tree Street as a location for their kids. And I think many of those kids need help. Tree Street can help many of them, but not all of them. And so I just want to place on record that we should look for an alternate location, maybe the same people, but in a different place, but at least one other alternate location. Thank you.
Ms. Parks?
Following up on Miss Eames' comment, I too know that there are some people in the community that are not comfortable with Tree Street Youth for various reasons. Tree Street Youth does amazing work. I don't want to discredit what they do at all. I don't know if there's a way to tie this into the next thing that we're going to be discussing, and maybe having the program alternate days at Tree Street and maybe somehow tied to the store next door or at Longley or something. So they're still in the same general location, but having it at alternating locations, or I don't know logistically how that looks. But seeing if we can find different options for that. But all around, I support this. I think that having more opportunities for students who are under a long-term suspension or expulsion, having the different pathways to get people back engaged in classroom while they are out for various reasons. I think we've needed that for a long time. And I think that this is a good first step to getting to where we need to be to make sure we're meeting the needs of all of our students, not just the ones that fit in the box in the typical classroom.
Ms. Scott?
Thank you. So first off, thank you for putting this down in paper and something that we could see in front of us, but also that the community could see what you were speaking about. I support doing something like this. I think it's really important. I think it's a piece that we are missing, and we do need to look at this. But I do agree with what's already been said. So last week I had my first tour of the new Boys and Girls Club, which is in the Armory right next door to the Lewiston Middle School. And I am thoroughly impressed with the work that they did there. And that particular building is geared towards middle school and high school students, so that the lower school, the elementary school students will still be using the facilities in Auburn, whereas this new facility in Lewiston will be geared towards our older students. And I think maybe that this is something that I had a conversation with the director there to see what they might be doing for after school programming, helping with some of our students with homework help. But they were also looking to have programming for alternate programming too. So I think that not necessarily used in this particular piece right now, but something that we should be looking at for future as maybe possible another location, something else that we could use to help some of the other students in different areas. So I will be supporting this. I do think that there's a possibility that it could be used, as Ms. Park said, with the other item that's coming up next too, that there might be some tie-in with that as well.
Ms. Whitlow? No? No. Same.
I think I read in the proposal, though, that expelled students aren't allowed on school grounds. So I think that makes Longley off limits, if I'm not mistaken.
That is a barrier for us with the students that are expelled. I'm still curious about though, if we start a pilot like this and again, conversation with the next item, that's what it's going to prompt need for conversation of if this is working, we probably need to look at this maybe as part of that pathways group that's going to start meeting to be thinking about this other component also.
One would hope that the number of students that would actually have to take advantage of this program would be small. You know, yes. So that, you know, I think that this is, you know, I'm definitely in support of this as well, but hopefully this is a very small number of students and that potentially with the right help, this program could put itself out of business. I would take a motion if there's no other comments.
So move.
Second.
So there's a motion by Ms. Whitlow, seconded by Ms. Hurd. Any further discussion? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was coming from over that way somewhere, but. Okay, so it's a motion by Ms. Whitlow and seconded by Ms. Medina. Any further discussion? Mr. Beauplan.
Really quick on this, Jake, is there a price tag that's attached to this?
Yeah, we used projections that we've used last spring for budgeting. It's about 115, and that's a teacher in the middle range and an ed tech with the middle range, both taking benefits.
Ms. Bowden.
Thank you. I guess I just want to make the point that we've had a couple committee members mention that this could tie into the next agenda item. So I'm wondering if we should vote on them together or if we should be voting on them separately.
I think where it's a reallocation of funds, I think they should be separate. Unless anyone has a problem with that. Okay. Any further comment? We have a motion. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you, everyone. The next item is to review and potentially vote on 4 positions for an asynchronous effort, and it's a reallocation.
I keep looking for a word other than asynchronous to talk about this, but really asynchronous is the right term. And so we've talked about the store next door and growing the capacity there with the downstairs being refurbished and Jamie leading that effort with student resources. And so I've been bugging her about when we could do a grand opening so people could come see some of the things they've done. They recently just had their community event, which was very well received and gathered a lot of materials that students need. And so when I sat with Jamie a while back and I said, well, so what do you need? What would you need if you were going to make this a more robust facility where students could come and they would use the laundry and they would maybe get some food that we've had donated, maybe even access services, counseling, mentors, get a little help with their homework, have people looking at their schedule, their pathway, just that school connected, continue to access school support. And she said, I need 4 people. And I said, well, do they need to be teachers? She said, well, not necessarily, but the problem they have is students who are accessing school on a regular basis, which is the goal of the store next door to support those students. They need additional other supports, but Jamie and her limited staff currently, they work during the day supporting kids who are popping in to see them. And when the school year starts, they'll be popping to see them at the high school and people will be coming for donations and all of those things during the school day. Well, what about after school when these students would be accessing that piece so that they don't miss school to access those other supports? So we need supervision. We need someone that would help coordinate these kinds of pieces. And this is really in its infancy. So we put in here 4 staff, but I also put in that this could be a mix of staff. These may not be education certified staff. It might just be someone who they're just good with the kids and know how to do these things and provide adequate supervision in the facility. And I made some bullet points here that just, again, offers flexibility to students, some structures for supervision, meal distribution, laundry, others, tutoring, mentoring, and potentially other services. And really just that helping hand to guide that secondary education the student towards graduation. And it's not a popular term, but, and I won't use a name because I don't know how they'll receive it, but I know of an adult individual who works for Lewiston Public Schools that when we hit the pandemic hard in the spring of 20, was the mother hen, the nag, whatever you call it. She did nothing but just poke these kids to get their work done. And a dozen kids made it because of that. And I think some of our kids don't have that. So I see that being a part of whatever this is. It's that kid that they could graduate this year, but now they might have missed a week of school or two because their life is just not as structured as some of the rest of us. And so to have that person that could do this, where were you last night? You were supposed to be here. I got a tutor, those kinds of things. Just that kind of life liaison component. So looking to re-engage students, I put an estimated cost here of 180,000. That's using an ed tech only projection for 4 people. I don't know that it has to be 4. I think if the idea that Jamie could start looking and she could start thinking about finding the right people, and then we could try to figure that out and start small. But I didn't want to do something without the committee's approval. Same approach to this pilot, using funds that are unspent currently, still taxpayer dollars, but not asking you to approve new positions that are automatically move forward. This would be part of the budget process if it were to continue.
Ms. Bowden.
Thank you. A couple things. So first, I just want to say, like, as a disclosure, I am on the board of the store next door, so I don't know if I need to recuse myself from this vote or not. Probably. Yeah. Okay. So that's all I'm going to say, and I'm going to step away from this particular agenda item.
Ms. Scott.
Thank you. So one of the conversations that I was actually going to bring up in my city council report that we had last week was around the use of the home ARP funds and how that can be used and how it has to be used, as Megan knows quite well. One of my pushes was to reallocate some of those funds more towards services, and in hopes that possibly the store next door would be able to get a little more funding for what they need, because they do fit the bill for this money being used for homeless, whether it's homeless adults, homeless youth, homeless families, it fits in that. So I guess what I would ask is, I do approve wanting to do this, but I would ask that, I know that they had spoke that they were going to be looking at getting some of that grant funding and some of that funding available. If that becomes available, if we could possibly use some of this funds, I know that it's unused funds right now, and as we're reallocating, if it becomes where they get a big amount of that, if maybe we don't give them the full 180 at that time, and maybe that could be used for something else that we might need in maybe the other program before. And that's what I was talking about when I was referencing, I think both of these kind of fit in a way, because we might be able to look at both of them and use that in that way, if that becomes available for them. I really pushed last week for that to be used in that manner until we figure out what's going to happen with another homeless shelter.
Yeah.
Mr. Beaufort.
Thank you. Would it be inappropriate to ask Member Bowden her opinion on this?
She has recused herself, so I would say yes.
Okay.
Ms. Parks.
Just to follow up on Ms. Scott's comments, ironically, at the city council meeting, they said that they hadn't had anyone apply for the home ARPA funds yet, but the store next door did actually submit an application for the home ARPA funds about 5 months ago. So they were already working on that prior to now.
Ms. Medina.
So I just want to say how amazing and in support I am of this. This is just going to make such a positive impact in the lives of so many youth, and I'm trying not to get emotional, but this would have made a difference in my life and the life of many of, my friends growing up. So this is great. And I say yes. So
Anyone else? Ms. Parks. Ms. Parks.
I move that we approve this proposal.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Ms. Whipple. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Ms. Bowden has recused herself, so all in favor? That is 801. Thank you. I'm sorry, who seconded it? Tanya.
Now I'm nervous.
Next item on the agenda is report from school committee chair. There's been we definitely have made some progress with our negotiations, and I won't steal Miss Whitlow's thunder on that one. I'll come back to her as chair.
Steal away.
We very successfully and very amicably settled the ed tech contract quite easily and quite smoothly, I would say. And I think to the benefit of everybody, I want to again put a big shout out to Sue Williams, Bill Grant, and Adam Hansen for their work, making sure that we had the information and staff support that it took for the negotiations committee, Ms. Bowden, Ms. Whitlow, and myself to get to a really, what I think is a really good conclusion of that contract. So at this point, we have the teachers, we have the ed techs in a TA, which is not completely signed, but I'm sure it should be finalized. We have food service workers, food service managers, and we are just getting ready to head into the administrators. And I'm hoping that after the administrators, that's it for this year. Well, there's also the personnel policy, which is not represented by a bargaining unit. So we don't have to negotiate that one, thankfully. There are, of course, I think we have 8. I think there are 8 separate bargaining units. We've worked our way through probably the most difficult ones at this point. So other than that, I think it's been a long summer, but we've made real progress in my mind. And school's upon us, but the hiring is going better, and I think we're going to be able to attract folks and keep folks, and I'm encouraged. The only other thing I had is I had an educator from Bates College reach out to me back at the end of May, working with LMS about a federal grant for something to deal with some school violence. She was working with former principal, Mr. Thurlow, at the time, and I was not able to meet up with her over the summer, but I'm going to try to reach back out and see what that is about. Hopefully that's something that we can reach out. It's a grant, evidently, and she's well aware of it. She's trying to push for it. The only other thing I have is that there has been some interest in reestablishing the high school expansion committee for phase 3, which would be a performing art venue, which was all part of the original plan. A couple of folks have started to work on that. That's a long-term project, but I'm involved in that as well. I guess that's all I have. The next item would be report from the superintendent.
I think my mind is so focused on tomorrow morning's welcome for staff and Wednesday morning's welcome for students that I shared the update earlier about just the start of school. Certainly I'll do my best to keep in the loop by email or other sessions that we have. But I would like to have Karen share a little bit about something that happened last week that we're pretty excited about.
So just to be transparent, I was writing him a note to say, can I share about this? So if anybody saw me writing on his paper, that's what I was writing about. I just wanted to share with all of you that last Thursday and Friday, we had all of our new teaching staff join us at the Green Ladle. A big shout out to Sue Williams and Michelle Kearney, Georgia Valley, and Jen Labonte for putting most of that together. We had several sessions where administration as well as other folks provided choice to our new staff to learn about our district. We got an incredible amount of positive feedback on that introductory day. We've tried to take feedback every year for that. And on Friday was a little bit more sit and get, if you will, or a little more dry. It was a lot of HR and here's how you do the certain things you need to do. But we ended the day with a tour of Lewiston. We put all of our new staff on buses, and Sue, Bill, and I were tour guides around Lewiston and provided some tidbits of information. And both days, our new staff were able to enjoy lunch at the Green Ladle and just get to know each other. So they spent some time in the expansion at the high school and all those bright, wonderful rooms, as well as at the Green Ladle. So I think it was pretty successful. Like I said, we got a lot of great feedback. We had over 125 folks join us. Some familiar faces, which was nice to see folks either coming back in a teaching capacity from an ed tech role, or just folks returning to Lewiston to teach again. So I just wanted to share with all of you that happened last week.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everyone that was involved in putting that on. Next item on the agenda would be city council rep.
Thank you. So last week we had quite a long workshop actually discussing the possible language around the ordinance for a new homeless shelter as that comes about. A lot of compromises were made, and I appreciate the conversation. There was some tough stuff to figure out, and there's still some levels that have to go through. At this point, we are now having the whole ordinance being looked at by the planning board to look at some possible zone change language. That's going to be happening on the 12th of September. And then our next public hearing, I think, is going to be the big one on this particular piece, will be on September 20th, where we'll be finally finishing off. There was some conversation about possibly having to extend the moratorium because of language not being yet in place when the moratorium expires, which is scheduled to expire on September 25th. I'm not sure how that's going to play out. I will say it publicly that I will not be voting for a moratorium again. I didn't feel that one was in place, and so I won't be voting for it again this time. But we'll see as we move forward how that goes. We also have a very big meeting coming up next week with quite a few things on the agenda. Some other things, some fun things that happened last week. We had our youth advisory council had their orientation day last week. What an exciting, enthusiastic group of kids coming in. I'm super excited. They have a lot of ideas and stuff that they want to do. And I think that maybe we can use them with some, when we were talking, just having the conversation tonight about possibly, talking about some of the things that are happening in our school. I think they could lead the charge on some of these things. And we've got kids from freshmen all the way up to seniors this time. So, and a good mix. So I think that we might be able to use them in that way. And I think they would be excited to do that also. I also had a meeting last week with Counselor McCarthy, along with the Lewiston Police Department and several staff and members of Bates College, to start having a discussion around community Bates College relationship with students, neighbors, and just about everything, trying to bring that relationship back together. And I will say that I was excited to be invited to this Saturday, and some of the other city councilors have been invited also for the annual Entering Student Orientation Program. So we're going to be doing tours with the Bates College students, the new freshmen that are coming in, and having them get to know us and not just have a tour by their fellow students, but also some of the city council members and elected officials in the community, so they can understand that we represent them as well as the city of Lewiston. And I think that that's a really important piece. I'm looking forward to it because I want the students to know that the city council and the people that are sitting at City Hall are there for them as well as the members of the community. And I think that will help build relationships there. Let's see what else I had. Oh, and we also have a ribbon cutting coming up on September 9th for the new exercise equipment at Smart Payne Park. And that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Linda. There is no student rep tonight. Updates from school committee subcommittees. I touched on negotiations. Policy.
Yeah, I just wanted to first talk about negotiations and thank Bruce for being at every single one of these meetings, because we try really hard to make it so that at least 2 members are at each one, so that, you know, everybody's kind of represented. And between Janet and I during the summer and just everything, it was, if she wasn't there, I was there, but Bruce was always there. So I want to thank him for that, because he was our constant. So policy committee, we do need to look at a couple things. Some policies came up in conversation when talking with ed techs, but I can't really say anything publicly because things that we spoke about is confidential and until things are ratified and stuff. But just a couple of policies we want to look at and see if we can help outside of the negotiation bargaining on helping them get what they need for their ed techs. So I think that's it.
Thank you, Tanya. And I've been accused of many things, but being there is one that I feel I do owe it to the committee. If I'm going to be here, I will be there. So, other subcommittees, facilities. We are in the process of working on the JCI agreement. We had a meeting last week. We're going to have another one at the end of this week. Member Hurd's husband has graciously joined us to bring his expertise into play. It's another educated voice that has experience with these type of contracts. So it's very helpful. We have a project that we're reviewing currently as far as ventilation for both the auditorium and the cafeteria at the middle school. That's another project that we're working on currently. And there's still an ongoing piece of this whole community solar, which is sort of stalled at the moment. But that is still something that's being discussed, and that we are trying to find some method or some place to implement part of that from a standpoint of good policy from an environmental standpoint. As far as other subcommittees, I don't think finance is meeting quite yet, and curriculum is probably, yes, well,
Just waiting for school to start.
anyone else with a subcommittee report? Seeing no volunteers. The next item is the school committee community announcement. I believe Ms. Parks may have one.
Yes, Michelle Crowley at Lewiston High School reached out to us today to share that the Lewiston High School Homecoming Committee has been working on some plans to make homecoming even more exciting this year than in the past. That's going to be September 19th to the 24th. And Gabby Blay and her class officers have been doing a lot of this planning. They have a fundraiser that they launched through Facebook. It's already raised over $2,500 in less than a week. And it can be searched on Facebook. I can't spell out the whole link right now. But it can be searched on Facebook as Blue Devils Homecoming 22. And so anyone who's interested in following that, getting updates or contributing to it can just go to Facebook and look up Blue Devils Homecoming 22.
Thank you, Ms. Parks. Ms. Scott.
Thank you. I just want to give a shout out for the Androscoggin Land Trust, which will be having their annual Riverside cleanup on Saturday, September 10th. They will be meeting in where the farmer's market is currently located for registration and T-shirts and to pick up materials to do the cleanup both in Lewiston and Auburn. And they do a wonderful job every year in picking up from Rancourt Preserve down by behind Martin's all the way up to the waterfall and beyond. I mean, so I encourage everybody to join. I will be doing it, and I will be putting together a team so that anybody wants to join my team. I'm putting the word out there to you as I'll be putting it out to the city council. Come join me. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Others, Ms. Whitlow?
I just had a question about the homecoming event. Have we not had that for a while since COVID, or is that, so they're trying to make it like big and get people excited again?
Yeah, I think they're just trying to get it big again. And I know that I have supported for many years, bringing back some of the things that there was a pause button hit on it for a number of reasons, even before the pandemic. So I think the effort is to really bring back some of that school spirit piece and raise the funds to do it properly.
Does the school committee have a role in that event or not? No. Okay.
Ms. Scott?
I just wanted to add to that, that there are 2 new members of the Youth Advisory Council that are sophomores that have been very pushing this forward with their school and building those funds. And they were the ones that really, I mean, they even spoke about it in their interview to be on the youth council, that this was one of their big projects to make sure that this is brought back. And I think that's phenomenal, because I remember homecoming that was one of the best weeks in school. It's the most fun. So I'm really glad that they're doing that.
One item I had, and I may have missed it. I've had so much going on with negotiation and everything, but I believe in October, Maine School Board Association has their annual meeting, and we are supposed to appoint a delegate. And I don't think that we have done that yet. I know Miss Whitlow had expressed some interest in it, but it doesn't have to. We had gotten one back a while ago, but you know, it's, and I think that the last 2 years it's been virtual. I think this year it is actually going to be a meeting. Ms. Parks?
If it's virtual again this year, I'd be interested in being the alternate delegate if Miss Whitlow's doing it. If it's not virtual, if it's in person. I don't want to do it if it's virtual.
Okay, so Ms. Scott.
So as much as we choose a delegate so that they can, help vote on some of the legislative issues, I've done that before several times. I think it's really important for new members to try to go and check it out. It is an amazing experience where you're able to go to different areas and to have different discussions about school policy, school committee roles. I mean, just you name it, everything that's out there about the schools. And it's a lot of fun, actually. You get to see a lot of vendors for school items and all sorts of different things. It's a lot of fun.
The latest I have on that is that it is October 22nd, starts at 9:30, and will again be held remotely via Zoom. That may shift, but that's the latest I have, and that was that came July 28th. So
October 22.
yeah, it's usually on a Saturday.
Stop it. Stop laughing at me. No, I do. I have a work retreat in Bar Harbor. I know. Thursday, Friday. No, it gets done Friday after. Okay. I can still do it. But I guess what I wanted to chat about is I really want the school board to come together, talk about issues, what's important, what do we want their school, their board, the main, what do you call it? The main school board administration, let them know what our concerns are. And, you know, I think obviously one of my big things is dyslexia. And I personally would like to represent Lewiston and what we're doing and what initiatives we'd like to see, but that's me personally, and I want to hear what everybody else has to say and what we think some other concerns are. We don't have to bring just one, you know, but I do know that dyslexia is something that's very, very important to me.
So Tanya, would you like to have maybe a quick workshop with the entire committee for some, or polls, or do some sort of Google Doc thing initially and get some written input and then have a workshop on it?
I think that's perfect. With at the Green Ladle.
There seems to be a theme here, but I'm not quite clear on what it is, but Ms. Scott.
So I was thinking that, you know, generally you can go on the Maine School Board Association's webpage and see what the most recent pieces of legislation that they're looking to have a delegate vote on and the topics that they're looking to have. So maybe we can give ourselves a couple of weeks, and when we meet mid-September, we can come back, make that the night that way we can make a vote on a delegate, have it in place, make sure that all that logistics gets taken care of, and we all have an understanding of what they're talking about. Because generally they put all that information out there. I'll be very honest though, I have not looked at it, so I'd have to look.
Ms. Parks.
I received the email with the links on July 28th. And it shows all of the 2022 proposed Maine School Board Association resolutions, and the delegate form and all of that stuff. So what would be discussed at that, and so that would be the list that we would go through to determine what's most important to us as a committee. But that came through July, what did I say? July 28th.
So it's about a month ago. Yeah. That's why I thought it was important to at least bring it up. So we don't just miss it and pass on it. So Ms. Whitlow.
Yeah, I just, we could definitely look through those, but they also offer time for people to speak on issues that they want to address too. So I'm just saying, dyslexia, go dyslexia.
Linda, you have done it.
I've done it every year that I was on the school board. I did it twice. I was the delegate, and I also did the National School Board Association's conference as well. Megan went to that with me. That was amazing also. But that was because it was coming to Boston. There are other school boards in this country that send people to all over the country to go to these, because they happen all over the country. And there was one year we were on the board, it was in Arizona, I believe, California one year. We very much wanted to go, but that's not in the budget for Lewiston School Department. So
It's in Orlando this year, and if we can find the funds, I think it's a great idea for us all to go.
it's a wonderful experience because you get to meet school board members across the country. And so all the conversation is around how they're handling it in their country. And we see what's happening here. We see what's happening across the country. We've all got a lot to say to each other, I think, and we've all got very similar things happening in our school districts. So I would definitely encourage the one in the state of Maine. I'm not offering to be a delegate, though. I'm sorry.
Understood. Understood. Thank you, Linda. So anyway, that's something, folks, for us to be working on, think about. And can we assume that somebody can put the Google thing out so that other people can jump into it?
Workshop.
Well, the workshop, but also if there's a form that we could, so people could just throw it all in one place.
Yeah, we can put together a form for people to put thoughts down. I also shared the email that came in on the 28th with all of you. It might be a refresher for some of you who got it, but for those of you who may not have gotten it, that's where the list of resolutions are. It talks about the delegates and the assembly. So.
We're down to future agenda items, item 20. Ms. Hurd.
Thank you. Just an update again. I did see that the Lewiston Police Department shared today on their Facebook page about an active shooter drill that they did at the high school. And I did have some parents reach out to me asking kind of what that was about and where we're at with that. So maybe if we could just have an update at some point.
I mean, I can do an update on that right now. They did 4 days of training, and it was all about response and entry. I can say with a high level of confidence that what happened in Uvalde will not happen here, at least not from a response perspective. So it was kind of an interesting thing to poke your head in on, which I did. They our local law enforcement is ready to react if need be. They hope to never have to, but they are ready to react if need be. We planned this well in advance. It was actually part of our conversation with our approach to the training that we did this spring, which again will continue this year. This will be back in front of you because we'll be talking about things that are hard to talk about, but will require your input when we talk about practice drills where we leave school grounds and things of those natures, and that will be a need. We'll have to be doing those things. But yes, there was a response training that happened in our school. We do work with local PD, and also beyond local, we had, well, how far did the reach go? We had sheriff, was state involved in this one? Do you know? I don't think state PD was involved in this particular one, but we have included state PD and others. So it's not the first time we've done this in our schools. We don't overly broadcast it before or during because of the way the training is conducted. But we did have to block off portions of our school grounds here for this training.
Ms. Medina.
I just wanted to go back to community announcements. I don't have anything. No, that's okay. I don't have anything coming up, but I just wanted to mention that Elizabeth and I did go to the Community Creators event on Saturday and did some tabling for the Lewiston Public Schools. We came up with a frequently asked questions, 1 page with our pictures, our contact information, just information on, what the school committee does and things like that. We've talked about meeting people where they're at, not only physically, but also in terms of how we send this information out. So it's easy for people to understand because that can scare people if it's too complicated. But I would like to also say, like, if you guys hear of anything, any events coming up where some of us can do some tabling and talk to parents, I think that'd be great. So yeah, just want to throw that out there. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Parks.
You always give me that look when I raise my hand, like I'm
Well,
doing something wrong.
I'm right-handed, so that's why that looks like that. look,
Okay.
so.
Following up on back to community events, the Lewiston Area Public Health Committee is having a recovery rally on September 17th in Kennedy Park. And they are table opportunities there. So I don't know if that's something that you're interested in going to, but I can pass it along to, or you can reach out to Dottie either way, and they can set up a table for you there too, if you'd like.
Anything else? Okay, the next agenda item is to enter into an executive session on a legal matter in accordance with 1 MRSA 4056E. And there is a second item, a legal matter in accordance with 1 MRSA 4056E. So 2 executive sessions, and we will not be coming back to the public meeting after that. So we need a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
So motion by Ms. Bowden, second by Ms. Whitlow. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Yes, and we are going to take a 5-minute break. Oh, we're making progress here, big guy.
Yeah, this next piece should actually.
I can't.